Hello out there, weirdos, and welcome back to the Weird Wide Web podcast. This is episode 17 of our first season, and I think there will only be one more episode after this, and that's just because I'm one of those human beings that has an aversion to odd numbers. I don't know why some of us are like this, but I can't end on 17. And I don't know what we'll come up with next episode, but I know this episode is going to be so interesting because I've been Googling and learning so much about my guest today, and I have so many questions. Today, I am here with author Elizabeth Broadbent, and we're just going to get to know her and talk about her writing career and the exciting things going on. How are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
I know that you've got a book coming out with Undertaker Books this month, right?
I do. I have a book coming out with Undertaker Books. It's a Southern Gothic novel called 98 Sabers. And it's imagine the family from Arrested Development lands smack in the middle of the X-Files.
Okay, I'm a huge fan of both of those shows, so I'm already pretty interested. Um, I see, though, because you described it as Southern Gothic, and I see that you tend to describe a lot of your writing that way. So, what is Southern Gothic really to you?
Southern Gothic, I'm from South Carolina, so I wrote a lot about the South, and it's really impossible to write about the South without writing about the pervasiveness of the past. And to me, that's really the essence of Southern Gothic, is writing about how the past keeps coming back and influencing the present.
I kind of love that description of it because I saw you had another one. Was it a novella, Inkvine?
Yes, Inkvine is also Southern Gothic, and Inkvine deals with a lot about toxic masculinity and class issues in a small town when a girl is discovering her sexuality for the first time.
Wow. So I'm already adding 2 books to my TBR, but I assume that'll keep happening. How did you, I mean, when I pulled up your website, which by the way, everybody is writerelizabethbroadbent.com. Did I get that right?
hmm
So writerelizabethbroadbent.com, and I was just kind of trying to brief myself. And I thought one of the funny things you said you've been writing since you were 5, and I really picked that up as I kept going because you've got a lot of credits, and it seems like you just never stop. Um, is there anything that really stands out so far in your writing career as like the shining moment or the shining achievement so far?
Um, I don't know. I have an MFA, and I always knew I wanted to be a writer. And I finished my MFA, and I had a horrible time defending my thesis. And my director was awful to me, and I quit. I quit writing for 10 years. And my husband actually shoved a laptop at me finally when my third son was born. And he said, "You're going crazy. You have to write."
Oh, bless him.
So I started mom blogging, and I wrote after Ferguson happened. I wrote a blog entry that I titled "A Mother's White Privilege."
Yes, I read that, and it really brought a little lump to my throat and some tears to my eyes.
Yeah, it was about how, as a mother of 3 blonde white kids, I would never have to deal with so much that a mother of BIPOC children would have to deal with.
Yeah, and the different scenarios you posed, you can't argue them really while you're reading
Yeah,
it.
yeah, because my children have so much privilege due to the color of their skin. And this was on, a little mom blog, right? And I posted it on Facebook. And I woke up the next morning and my blog had crashed because it had over 1 million visitors.
That can happen.
Yeah, apparently that can happen. So I bought more bandwidth and it crashed again.
Nice. I mean,
And
not nice, but
yeah, and all of a sudden I got an email from the Huffington Post saying we'd like to reprint this. And of course, I'm like, this mom blogger. I'm like, yeah, of course, please, Huffington Post, take this. And I got an email from Jill Smokler from Scary Mommy saying we'd like to reprint this too. And I'm like, yes, please, Scary Mommy. Then I got an email from CNN saying, can you come on CNN? And I said, yeah, I can come on
You're just
CNN.
sitting there. You're just sitting there living your life, and you get an email
And
from CNN.
yeah, and then I got an email from MSNBC. And I was like, I guess I can do this too.
How nerve-wracking. Oh my goodness. I'll let you keep going.
Yeah,
I'm already getting nervous just listening.
yeah, and I was getting real scared at that point, and I did both of those. And then a week later, I got an email from NPR, and I did All Things Considered.
Wow.
And at that point, Jill Smokler from Scary Mommy took me on as a staff writer. And, and I say that like, oh, I wrote for Scary Mommy. It's a parenting website. And, a lot of people kind of yawn and they're like, oh, wow, you wrote parenting stuff. That's great. The thing with Scary Mommy is that we were writing feminist work that had to do, we talked about like, oh, this is how you parent your kid. But most of what we wrote was not just about parenting, it was about mental health issues. No one was talking about how parenting affected your mental health, and no one was pitching that directly to women at the time. We talked a lot about politics. We talked about LGBTQ issues. And we talked about this to a severely underserved demographic, which was primarily suburban mothers.
Yeah, you dared to be bold, and it seems like the audience was crying out for it, especially with the oversaturation of all these parenting websites. To have something like that where the articles are speaking on a personal level like no other.
Yeah, I mean, we had a site that was called The Confessional where women could go and say like whatever they wanted, like their worst secrets. And that was probably the most popular part of Scary Mommy. This was a huge deal. No one was doing this, and one of the things that made us so powerful is we used humor to do it. And so you went on Scary Mommy, and the articles were really relatable because in part they were funny.
Right.
So people wanted to keep reading this stuff. And there are about a dozen staffers. We had literally millions of views a month. I mean, we were in the millions.
Wow.
And I didn't realize this until, I wrote for them for 8 years. I didn't realize how big our audience was until after we were bought out by BDG, who owns Bustle. They were so terrible to our editors that the staff quit en masse. And they told us we couldn't write about politics, we couldn't curse anymore, a variety of other things. They cut our LGBTQ content.
Oh.
So we were like, F you, we're going, and we left. And I didn't realize how big our audience was.
Yeah, because you don't really give much thought to the website you're on when you're reading these articles. But I know that I've ended up on the Scary Mommy website and read a few of their things. So that's pretty awesome. And you dare to be political. I'm always a little bit of a chicken about that because I'm not good with the backlash, but it does sound like sometimes you almost laugh it off and use it as a badge of honor, like in the case of conservative Joe Walsh.
Oh my God. Yeah. I wrote an article about how creepy daddy-daughter dances are, which they're really freaking creepy, and how creepy purity culture is.
Oh, I watched an excellent movie about that. I'll have to send it to you and make sure you watched it. But I'll let you keep going.
Please do. No, I really want to see it. Please send that to me. Because that stuff is really creepy. And, it fetishizes female purity. I wrote a whole essay about that, and it was funny because all my essays were funny. And it got traction in the conservative community and really pissed them off. So Joe Walsh went on Twitter and called me everything wrong with America, personally. Elizabeth Broadbent is everything wrong with America.
That's pretty
And
amazing.
which was pretty amazing. And except I started to get death threats.
Oh,
And like literal death threats.
wow.
And I had to lock down all my social media. When I started writing indie horror, in fact, no one could friend me. I had to go through and unlock all my social media, like site by site, because everything was still locked down totally.
And that's why my heart drops, even putting myself in your position of putting yourself out there this way, because that, unfortunately, is the consequence in today's society.
Mm-hmm. Well, the the funnier part about that is when I locked everything down, because these people are so crazy, they started sending the death threats to my husband. So
Wow.
for years, my husband would get death threats for me, and he stopped telling me about them.
Did he ever regret pushing that laptop towards you and telling you to get back to writing?
No, he didn't. He's wonderful. But I mean, I've gotten them as recently as 2 months ago for an article I wrote about, I think it's titled "Dear Racist White Men, Your Time Is Over" or something. But I got one like 2 months ago through my website for that one.
Well, I think everything that's wrong with America is the people sending the death threats, but that's kind of
Basically,
obvious. So,
yeah, basically yes. It's the people sending the death threats, but yeah.
and as far as now, I know this isn't why you've written under a pen name because, like we've already discussed, you're brave. You stand behind what you say. But it was kind of a different story. I'm sorry. I've been stalking your website, making notes because I wanted to just have so much to talk about, and I did see that you were writing under a pen name for a while. Do you want to go into that at all? Maybe tell that story.
I did write LGBTQIA under a pen name for a little bit. And I did that for a very specific reason. My husband was a high school teacher, and I wanted to write LGBTQIA that his kids could read. And here's the thing: every narrative about being LGBTQ in the South for teenagers says get out. All of it.
Right.
It's the South is terrible. You need to leave. And for a lot of kids, that's not realistic. And so I wanted to write some narratives for my husband's students that gave them some kind of hope in the place they were
Yes,
in.
make them feel at home where they're at.
Exactly. And so I didn't want them to have the name Broadbent on them so he could put them in his classroom. So I used a pen name for a while, and I wrote about 10 YA novels and self-published them that were LGBTQ. I took them out of print not long ago, but I do have some still in my house, and it's kind of fun. I was able to give them to one of my son's best friends recently, who's non-binary, and the other day they were reading one of my favorites, and they were like, "Oh, August, tell your mom I'm in the middle of it, and it's so good, it's so good." And honestly, if literally no one else ever read that book, that was just like that was my heart. I almost like burst into tears.
That's so sweet. That's yeah. That's everything right there. That's what it's all about.
I mean, my oldest son has read them. My oldest son loves them. And that's just everything.
Are they
You
well, I mean,
know,
I know they're not out there to buy, so I'm just kind of asking for curiosity. Are they connected or do they each kind of stand on their own?
Three of them are set in the 90s and they're connected. The rest of them all kind of just stand on their
That's
own.
so cool that you did that for the kids. I mean, I should probably get back to the actual book that's out this month that we should be plugging. But like I said, I scribbled down all these notes because I got so excited about your life. Because, first of all, I don't have much of one. So I need to live vicariously. Um, but yeah, you've got lots going on. And this month, it's 98 Sabers coming out. So could you maybe tell us about that? Maybe not like a prepared synopsis, but just what are the characters, the setting, and kind of the plot going on in that one?
So, somebody recently on Goodreads described it as the family from Michael McDowell's The Elementals in Keeping Up with the Kardashians. And that's actually like a really good synopsis of it. So there's a guy, Ash Trenum, whose father dies. And he is forced to call his brother and his two cousins who grew up on the family plantation to come back because only heirs who attend the funeral will inherit. And Ash has been running his family's ancestral plantation as a wedding destination because this place, he hates doing it, but this place employs his dozens and dozens of cousins. And he's forced to do this to keep all his cousins employed.
Right.
And he loathes it. But he feels like he has to do this to keep all these people, working. And his brother is estranged from his father. Ash has not spoken to his brother Sullivan in 10 years. So all these people have to come back for the funeral. And the problem is that this plantation is totally haunted. And in order to make some more money, Ash started having a reality show there.
Okay.
Kind of like if anybody out here has seen Skinwalker Ranch.
Yeah, I immediately picture some humor injected here.
Oh, there's a ton
Okay.
of humor in it. It's really funny. And it's also really black at the same time. I mean, I always describe it as like the Royal Tenenbaums. Like there's a lot of Wes Anderson vibes
And
in
it's
this
funny
in this
because
novel.
we don't categorize books as horror comedy. And I really feel like we should be pushing that more because there's a huge audience for it. But if they don't know what's going to make them laugh, they might just scroll right past and not pick it up.
Oh, there are hardcore Grady Hendrix
Okay.
vibes in this book. But it's a little darker than your standard Grady Hendrix book. I think Grady Hendrix tends to be really fun all the way through. And Sabers will make you laugh, but it will probably also make you
Is
cry.
there some depravity?
There's some depression more than depravity.
And you reuse your Southern Gothic settings a lot, don't you?
I am actually autistic. So I just recently found that out. I thought I had really severe ADHD. And when my son was diagnosed autistic, we went, oh no, so is
Put
mama.
two and two together. It's crazy how long we can go and not understand ourselves. Yeah.
Exactly. And so one of the keys to us figuring out that I was also autistic was when I was a child, I had a really long history of what's called maladaptive daydreaming. And what that means is you develop these incredibly elaborate daydreams. And when I say elaborate, I mean like world building.
Wow.
Like you have entire
Are you
settings built
still,
to
is it
your.
like 1 foot in reality and 1 foot out of it? Like you're still keeping track of what's going on, but you're just, okay.
Exactly. You're still keeping track of what's going on in your life, but you have really elaborate scenarios going on in your head. And that kind of carried into my writing. And so my settings and my worlds tend to be incredibly rich. And so because they're so detailed, I don't want to leave them behind
Right.
because I put so much effort into them. So All my Southern Gothic stuff is set in the same town in the same county, because I put so much effort into it, and I know all the stuff going on in there so well that it's almost easier for me to keep building on it
Well,
rather
and
than.
I believe readers appreciate that too. I mean, if you tell me something's set in Castle Rock at this point, I know the gist of it. I know the layout because I read King. So I like the reuse of the settings a lot. Do you know how many books or stories you've written in that setting?
Let's see. God, how many Southern Gothic novels have I
And
written?
plus, I never even let you
Um,
say the name. Where are we at?
we're we're in Legree County, and it's spelled like Laguerre, but South Carolina cannot pronounce anything correctly, especially if it's Huguenot French. So it is actually pronounced Legree, and the town is called Lower Congaree.
Okay.
So we're in Lower Congaree. Inkvine is set in Lower Congaree. 98 Sabers is set in Lower Congaree with the Trenham family. My novella Blood Cypress, which comes out with Raw Dogs Screaming in 2025, is with the Carson family in Lower Congaree. The Swamp Child, which comes out in October 2025, is with Talitha the Swamp Witch in Lower Congaree. My novel Blue Feather, which comes out with Undertaker Books in February 2026, is set in the neighboring Everett County, which kind of has some connections to what's happening in Legree County. And then I have a novella coming out in 2026, which is also set in Lower Congaree, that's YA. And then I probably shouldn't tell you this, but I'm going to tell you anyway. I have a ton of short stories set in Lower Congaree, and they're going to be released in a collection with Undertaker Books.
Wow. See, I love that. I love the elaborate world building like that. And well, I don't think that makes me particularly unique because I feel like as readers, the deeper we can get invested in these worlds, the more we feel like they're real and it brings them alive. So it's really quite impressive you've stuck with that setting because I do have a problem with hopping around myself. I can never stay in the same place mentally. But that's a crazy amount of work set in this same environment. And so I do want to pick up some Elizabeth Broadbent and start getting invested, but I'm afraid I might never leave.
The important thing to point out too is that I'm very careful. Number one, you can pick them up anywhere. You do not have to read them in some kind of order, and they don't spoil each other. So, like for example, if you read like my Raw Dog Screaming novella Blood Cypress, it's not going to spoil like 98 Sabers.
Okay.
And even though like the Swamp Witch and is Talitha is in 98 Sabers, it won't spoil the Swamp Child because she's in the Swamp Child. So like I'm very careful that they don't mess with each other, that they're mutually exclusive, that readers aren't like, oh no, I have to read this novel first and then I have to read this novel next and I have to understand this novel to understand this novel. No, they're all mutually exclusive novels that stand on their own. They just happen to be set in the same
That's
location.
perfect. You hear that, everybody? You can pick up any one of these titles at any time, anywhere, and get started. So go do it. Um, let's see. What else should I ask you? What's your favorite color?
My favorite color is that is actually a color is probably blue, but my favorite color to wear is black. And fun corollary to that, because of that, all my pets are black
All right, now I got to hear about all
because
the pets.
I have two German shepherds. Well, one's a German shepherd, one's a German shepherd mix because she's shelter dog. So shelter dog is black, and she's a goofball, and she was supposed to belong to our kids, but she thinks she belongs to my husband. And we also have 2 black cats.
And what are their names?
The black cats are named Navidson from House of Leaves, and Babu, which is the name of the ocelot in Archer.
I should have known about the House of Leaves ones. Your taste in literature is so almost intimidating to me because you've probably read all the classics that have been on my list for 30 years. Does that kind of go, has that been that way for a long way back, or was that kind of brought on by your college years, or?
That was okay. That was from college. Because I have to make it very clear, I grew up in a household that did not have books. My household did not have books. We had like my mom's crappy
Right.
romance. And I say crappy romance in the sense of like, this was not high literature. We had like very poor examples of genre fiction. Like, all genre fiction done well is fantastic. Like, romance can be done very
But the
well.
Botus
It's not my
Rippers, I don't know. I never got into it, but to each his own.
To each his own. It's not my choice, but I know it can be done
True.
well. But um the taste in literature is really from my college years. Um I was really lucky. I went to, now I'm going to say I'm really lucky, and people listening to this are going to laugh their asses off. Um, I went to the University of South Carolina. I went to the Honors College there. And I know y'all are laughing your asses off, whatever. Um, but I was in the Honors College, and they spoiled the hell out of us because we were the really smart kids at the state university. So one of my professors was the foremost Fitzgerald scholar in America. One of them was the foremost John Updike scholar in America. And we had classes with like 8 kids in them.
Right.
And like literally, there were 8 of us. And these were all the kids in the South who couldn't get into Ivy League schools. Like, these are the kids that like barely
I've
missed
always felt
Ivies.
like that would be the way a classroom would function best. I mean, obviously, but it's just not feasible. But the smaller group like that.
It was amazing. I only had 2 classes my entire time in college that were lecture halls.
And so you had amazing professors up until some kind of thing about a thesis.
Yeah, up until my graduate, I did literally defended my graduate thesis. I had amazing professors, and I lived in what's called a residential college, which we had professors that literally ate dinner with us every night. So I had these really brilliant people, not only like teaching me in the classroom, but then coming in and eating dinner with my friends and I. So, and like hanging out with
Right.
us, and like having tea with us, watching movies with us, like watching like films with
Who can
us.
say that of their college
Um,
experience? That's pretty unique and special.
it was really amazing. My undergraduate mentor actually was the this is insane. He was the guardian of Nina Simone's legacy. He just passed about a
What
month
does that mean
ago.
to be guardian of her legacy? Like he would give out the rights to the songs or
No, he lived in Tryon, North Carolina, which is where Nina Simone is from, and he basically is responsible for making sure she has been remembered. Like, the fact that we know about Nina Simone, the fact that like we have her recordings, the fact that like her house has been preserved, that's due to the efforts of my
Hmm,
undergraduate mentor,
wow.
Chris
Well,
Armbrust.
personally, I first heard about her in the movie A Point of No Return. Uh,
Um, yeah, I mean, other than the fact that like, yes, she's been in movies, but like Chris is responsible for like a lot of her recordings were very difficult to find. A lot of her work was difficult to find. Her
so
house
did
was
he
falling
how did he
down.
so he kind of really, instead of guarding her legacy, he was almost piecing it back together in order to preserve it?
Yeah, he made sure her house was preserved. He made sure like people in Tryon remembered her. He built the Nina Simone monument. He's responsible for kind of, I think her house is in the process of being open to the public now in Tryon. They just did an HBO documentary about her.
And how long was he your professor?
Oh, I've known Chris since I was like 18.
Well, I'm sorry for your
I,
loss, and it sounds like a longtime mentor has passed.
yeah, he was really amazing.
Um,
Hmm.
what has it kind of turned into today? What do you read for your leisure?
God, I read everything. I read everything. God, what am I reading right now? I just finished the novel Wilder Girls, which I loved. I just finished, God, what is the name of that novel? A River Solomon novel. It's a sci-fi novel, which had an amazing portrayal of autism. I really loved it, and I'm actually Googling this right now because I can't remember the name of it, and it's going to make me crazy, and I want to give River Solomon credit for
Yeah,
this. So I read a lot of sci-fi. I read a lot of horror. But at the same time, an unkindness of ghosts. And
and isn't an
I
unkindness?
really like.
It's some kind of flock of animals, isn't it?
I think
Yeah.
so. Yeah. I read a lot of Tom Piccirilli. I love Tom Piccirilli. He's one of my favorites. I read a lot of Southern Gothic whenever
What
any
did
kind of
I
Southern
read by
Gothic.
him back in the day? A choir.
Oh, A Choir of Ill Children. That is literally
Yes.
one of my top
I
five
read that
favorite books.
probably 10 years ago, and I still remember. So yeah, that's a good one.
Oh my gosh, literally one of my top five
Wow.
favorite books. I
And here
love
we are
that
discussing it 10
novel.
years later. Oh, I love that.
Yep. I love Southern Gothic. But I mean, and I say, so I read all this indie horror. But at the same time, I mean, I was just driving down to South Carolina this weekend, and I put on Faulkner's The Sound and the Fury while I drove because that was a long ass drive from Virginia, and I needed something I was not going to have to hit the buttons on Spotify for.
I can do that, but
And
if I'm not driving or staying active, I will fall asleep to the classics. Like you'll find me drooling, but
I love The Sound and the Fury. Blood Cypress is based on the Compson family from The Sound and the Fury. So I did base like parts of Blood Cypress on The Sound and the Fury. So I did kind of steal that, but I stole the structure from my very favorite Faulkner novel, Absalom, Absalom. And that is the book that I want somebody to read to me when I'm dying. I told my husband that the other day, and he was like, "Why are you so morbid, honey? Please don't be morbid and talk about dying." And I'm like, I'm dead serious about this, and I really want you to read that book to me when I'm dying, and I'm telling you this because it is very important. And he's like, "Can we not talk about this?" I'm like, "Honey, I will argue for that being the greatest Southern
and
Gothic
even
novel."
Flannery O'Connor, who I always feel bad because I've it's a fellow female and I've not read any of her, but is that Southern Gothic as well? So
Oh
you're
my gosh,
pumped
yes.
full of
And
Southern Gothic at all times.
she Flannery O'Connor is awesome because she has a wonderful eye for character. Flannery O'Connor loves people, but she knows she was Catholic, and so she has a really good eye for like the fallen nature of man. And Flannery O'Connor's characters she's kind of mean about people. She loves them, but she's
Ooh,
kind of
I like
mean.
that though.
And
Because mean,
her stuff,
mean a lot of times is just because you're being brutally honest.
that is a good way to put it. Flannery O'Connor is brutally honest, and she's funny. She's
And that's important
hilarious.
too, like you said, with the Scary Mommy website and how it kind of caught on because you were incorporating humor into the serious topics. Because there's only so much serious we can stomach all at once.
And that is so important. If you want people to keep reading, you've got to be funny with the serious stuff. Like with this stuff that is so freaking heavy. And 98 Sabers deals with a lot of that. 98 Sabers has some seriously heavy themes in it. When you're dealing with Southern Gothic, a lot of the things that come up are racial. A lot of the things in the South, when you start talking about history, you inevitably start talking about race. You talk about a plantation, you can't ignore it. And 98 Sabers is set on a plantation. So the first thing you think about when you think about a plantation is
Right.
slavery.
Is that one out yet? Because I never even mentioned a release date for anybody. And
98 Sabers comes out November 29th. So it comes out on this, we're talking right now, it comes out this Friday. But I'm sure for your listeners, it'll probably be out already.
well, I'll probably actually get this up today. But now that we're discussing that, can they pre-order if I do get this up today?
You can pre-order it. Pre-order through the Undertaker Books website, and you'll get the physical copy of the book along with a free
Oh,
ebook.
yeah. I think it was my interview with TJ Price. He had mentioned that Undertaker is doing that. And I think that's just perfect because why not? You buy the print book, you get the e-copy. That's what everyone should be doing. But they're the innovators there, guys. You got to go to Undertaker Books to get that deal.
Exactly. But when when you read about stuff that's this heavy, a lot of the time, it would be kind of a slog if it was just this heavy subject. And I think a lot of people understand that. So when you read like 98 Sabers, you kind of have to break it up. You have to break up this really heavy stuff, You can't weep through the whole novel.
Exactly.
So I pull a really good Wes Anderson with that one. And I mean really good in the sense of like that's kind of what I'm
Who's
trying
your
for there.
favorite character in that one?
Oh, definitely Sullivan.
Okay.
Definitely Sullivan. We are the same type of hot mess. We don't deal with it the same way, but we are the same type of hot mess.
I like that. I'll have to keep an eye out for Sullivan because I think I'm going to pick that up and read it. I've been trying to remind myself to infuse more humor into my writing because for a while there, well, to be honest, for a while there, it became a chore where I was kind of forcing myself to do it, which sometimes you just have to do to get through your slump. But it's hard to be funny
You do.
when you're doing that. So I'm trying to get back to my playful self and find that balance again. So I think I might pick up 98 Sabers because it sounds like what I need. And I'm not just saying that because you're on my podcast.
I had a lot of fun writing it, and it was it's interesting that I had fun with it. I started the day after my father died, and that's why the novel starts with Ash's father dying, because that's where I was at the time. So I naturally started it. Their father dies, and I realized about a month before the release that I had written a novel instead of grieving my own father's death. My father and I were estranged. My father was an inveterate racist. And that's why I wrote 98 Sabers. And I didn't realize it at the time. And when I realized that, I just broke down crying in my car.
Well, I wouldn't say you necessarily wrote it instead of grieving because I think you needed to put down everything and take a look at it first before you knew how to process the grief. Because relationships like that are so bizarre to deal with because a part of us, we love these people, but they're so flawed. I think you just needed to write that story before you could have your cry.
Yeah. No, certainly. I mean, my father was a lot like Trenham Truelock. In the novel, my father was verbally abusive. My father was an alcoholic. My father never flew a Confederate flag, but my father espoused a lot of the ideas that Trenham Truelock has. Or Truelock Trenham. I don't know why I'm saying Trenham Truelock. I'm getting his names mixed up.
I am putting together a book called A Sleeve of Hearts, and I keep typing a heart of sleeves and having to erase it, so it's going around.
Well, I think the problem is in South Carolina, we give everybody last names as first names. So you just mix them up all the damn time. I know a ton of people whose last name is Truelock. I know a ton of people whose first name is Truelock. So,
I
yeah.
gotta visit the South because I think my online friends from the South are the liveliest of the bunch.
Oh, we're interesting down here. I'll tell you that. I mean, it was funny. I went down to South Carolina this past weekend to visit my best friend, um, who's a public defender in Oconee County, which is not where I'm from. I'm from Columbia. Um, but my best friend lives in the upstate. So to the upstate I went. And, I got just into the state. And, oh, there's the Confederate flag. There we go. They're flying that flag. But right next to it, you got that moon spangled banner, the palmetto and the crescent moon, which is not actually a crescent moon. Don't get me started. But, there's a liquor store. The liquor store is not labeled liquor store. It's got the 3 red dots instead because it is illegal to write liquor on your advertisements. We still sell mini bottles in all the liquor
Yeah, oh yeah,
stores.
we got that.
We have the education lottery down there. And it's so bizarre down there. It's like, when I went down there, it's like all these little details that I don't see in Virginia. I'm like, oh yeah, the education lottery. Goddamn, I look up at the bar and there's Clemson playing Citadel.
What I
I'm
mean,
like, oh shit.
what is an education lottery? I'm sitting here nodding my head, and it's like I suddenly realize I don't even know what we're talking about.
Oh, they apparently allegedly give the money from the lottery to the education to like education. We didn't weren't allowed to have legalized gambling for a long time because we have video poker and video poker went real bad. So we made gambling illegal, but then like we passed a bill to have the lottery, but because nobody wanted to have the lottery, they sweetened the deal by saying the money would all go to education.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Video poker was a whole deal down there.
And what was interesting
Yeah.
too, when I was reading your article that went viral, "A Mother's White Privilege," and it started off kind of addressing the whole thing in Ferguson, Missouri, with the shooting of Michael Brown and the riots and stuff that happened after. But I was actually in a club in St. Louis that night. I think it was Foo Bar Club. We were just seeing some metal bands, which is the only thing I ever go out to do. And we heard just so many sirens and everything on our way home, and we just thought there's got to be something big going on, and that's when all that started. So that was real close to home for us. And my grandparents' house was right there in Ferguson. My dad was living in it at the time, and yeah, that was such an emotional time. So when I was going to have you on as a guest today, and I pulled up that article, I just thought, well, here's our connection right here. That's the topic that hit so close to home that it got you to write your viral article, basically the article that got your whole momentum going.
That was I mean, I can't imagine being that close to it.
And these are the important
Mhm.
issues that someone has to be brave enough to write about, and someone has to be called Everything Wrong with America Today by Joe Walsh. And that's why we appreciate you.
Well, thank you.
So, yeah, I think this has been a great episode because I think I've actually run out of things to say and ask. So, I'm going to direct everyone to writer ElizabethBroadbent.com. I'm going to tell you to look for 98 Sabers coming out this Friday through Undertaker Books. And I really just want to thank you for coming on. I think it's been a great chat.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
For all our listeners out there, I appreciate you tuning in to episode 17 of the Weird Wide Web podcast. I will be back with one more episode before I close out season 1, and I will see you guys next time.